Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a little something different. I'm going to be making some stenciled home decor, specifically these easy tags that are door hangers. I've admired these on Pinterest. I've been wanting to make them for a while. It's finally warmed up enough to where I got out to my garage and was able to get some wood cut and sanded down. All the supplies, everything I'm using is going to be listed down in the description box. If you have any questions, head down there. So the first thing I did was cut out my tags. I used a 1x4 board and I cut that down to 16 inches. So two pieces at 16 inches. I did that with my miter saw. Once I had those cut to 16 inches, I then went ahead and turned my miter saw to 45 degrees and I cut the angle on both sides. I used a little triangle ruler to get those just right, made my lines, then used my miter saw to cut them. I also went ahead and used my drill and a drill bit to put those holes in the top. So super simple and easy. If you don't have a miter saw, you could use a band saw if you wanted to. You could also just use a handheld jigsaw. That would work as well. I then took my sander and sanded them down very, very roughly. Nothing drastic here. My 1x was already pretty smooth. And then it was time to start painting. I am using acrylic paints for this. These are just the Michaels brand of acrylic paints, Craft Smart, I believe. I'll leave a link to some on Amazon also down below, but I'm using the color Ivory for this. I'm using a foam brush to put this on. That's what works best for me to not get any streaking at all. And I do very thin layers. I am talking super duper thin. The thinner you go, the faster this is going to dry and the faster you can get on your second coat. If you goop it up and you layer it up a really thick layer, it's going to take longer to dry. These are acrylic paints. They dry pretty fast anyway, but just know if you goop them up, they're going to sit a little bit longer and then you're going to have to walk away. By the time I had this coat down, I moved on to my next board. I could come back to this first board and put on my second coat. I did about 3 layers of this. Don't forget the sides and the bottom and the 2 angles as well. I also do the backs just in case I messed up, and I did mess up on this one, so I'm glad I did. But that way I can flip these over and not have to worry about which side I need to be using here. So once I had those painted, it was time to start stenciling. You want to make sure that your paint is good and dry so you don't get any bleeding. And then go ahead and position your stencil, and I like to use painter's tape to keep mine in place. These stencils are from the Crafters Workshop. They are amazing for home decor. They are big and they are really nice thick stencils. You can reuse them over and over and over again. Absolutely love them. Now the first one I put down, I did way too much paint. I didn't take my own advice. I didn't do small little layers. I tried to goop this up. You can see what a mess I had. So I pulled this up, and the good thing about painting your whole board, not just the front of it, is if you mess up like this, I can flip this over, I can use the back of it, or I can just flip that over, use the back of that as my backboard, and stencil on my other board. So I set that aside to dry. I didn't want to wipe it off or anything and make the back of it black. So I just left it as is. I'm going to let that dry. And then I went back to my makeup sponge, which I should have used in the first place. I tried to use a brush to stencil through. It just didn't work out, and I gooped way too much paint. I like to use a makeup sponge. You could also just use your sponge that you use to paint your board with. Make sure that you dab off a lot of extra paint. You can see how much paint I'm actually putting through on the stencil around the letters. Very, very little. It's easier to go through and do a couple of layers of very thin paint rather than go in and goop it up and have to totally scrap your project. The good thing about doing such thin layers as well, I can go through this whole stencil, and by the time I've made it through, I can go back to where I have begun on the first one and do my second layer. It will be dry by that time because I'm using such thin layers. So I sped this up quite a bit because this is basically all it is, putting the paint through the stencil once you have it positioned. But you do want to make sure you get the positioning right. And to make sure mine doesn't move, like I said, I like to use that blue painter's tape. I let that dry, and then I went ahead and pulled off the stencil, and you can see what a big difference using those thinner layers makes. It gives you a much crisper stencil design on your finished sign. You can, if you do have any little mishaps, let it dry and then take your original paint, in this case it would have been ivory, and just go around with a thin brush to clean up any little mishaps. I did have one on my E, and I cleaned that up very quickly. I used Tulle to go ahead and put my two little tags together. I just took both ends, threaded them through both of the openings from the back, and tied a bow in the front. That's going to give me a loop on the top where I can hang this up. Now, if I were to hang this up as is, both of these tags are going to fall on top of each other. You're not even going to notice that two of them are there. So I took a little bit of hot glue, put some on the back tag on the front of it, and then I'll go ahead and overlay my top tag on top. Make sure that your bow is pulled nice and tight so you don't get that caught up in there, and just go ahead and give that a good press and offset it a little bit. That's going to give you that appearance of the two tags, but it's going to stay put. Now I went ahead and let that dry for a little bit, and here is the finished product on the door. I absolutely love these. They are so cute and just a nice little addition. There are a ton of different, there's my daughter. I only got one picture before she got in the mix. So there she is. Now I will leave a link to all the different home decor stencils that the Crafters Workshop does offer because there are so many more options. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and happy crafting.